Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you coming today. My name is Ron Weiniger. I am the Chief of Police here in the Boise Police Department, and I have with me several folks, one who will also address you today, Josh Tewalt, the Director of the Idaho Department of Corrections. Would like to start with just a quick recap of some of the things that we have already provided as far as a press release and information. The incident began that we are discussing today at approximately 2:15 a.m. as the Idaho Department of Corrections officers had transported an inmate, Skylar Mead, to the hospital, St. Alphonsus, for some medical treatment. As they were preparing to leave to transport Mead back to the Idaho Department of Corrections facility, an unknown at this time suspect attacked and fired at the officers, striking two of them. Boise police officers responded to the hospital to reports of an active shooter, with one officer ultimately firing his duty weapon at an armed individual near the entrance to the emergency department. That individual was later determined to be an Idaho Department of Corrections employee. He was not seriously injured and is receiving treatment for his injuries, for which we are thankful. The hospital was locked down as officers searched the area for the suspect. A preliminary investigation indicates that Mead and the shooting suspect got into a gray four-door sedan, possibly a Honda Civic, and fled the area just prior to Boise police officers arriving. Mead has been serving time in the Idaho Department of Corrections system for aggravated battery on a law enforcement officer with a firearm enhancement, and he has many prior convictions, including felony possession of controlled substance, grand theft, and introduction of contraband into a correctional facility. He has been incarcerated since October of 2016, and his most recent sentence was due to end in October of 2036. In total, 3 IDOC, or Department of Corrections, officers were injured in this incident. One officer shot by the suspect is in critical but stable condition. The second officer shot by the suspect has serious but non-life-threatening injuries. And the third IDOC officer, who was injured during gunfire from a responding Boise police officer, has received non-life-threatening injuries and is reportedly doing well at this time. So with that, I would just like to make a couple of statements and talk a little bit about some things that have been put out, including some community concerns that we obviously have. We issued a blue alert with the intention of providing as much information as we could as quickly as possible, because Mead and the shooting suspect and anybody else who may be involved in this obviously brazen attempt to get Mead out of custody. They are dangerous, they are armed, and they have shown a propensity for violence. And we want to make sure that any member of the public who happens to come in contact with them is aware of that, and that you do not try to intervene or contact them, but simply call 911 and provide us with as much information as you can. This is a very dynamic, unfolding incident, and we are searching as quickly as we can, following every lead we can, to try and get these folks into custody again as quickly as possible. But I want to make sure that the public knows these folks are dangerous. We don't believe they are necessarily a danger to the public per se, unless they are confronted or somebody stands in their way of being captured again. So we just encourage folks to call us, call 911, and let us approach that with the special tools and tactics and training that we have available to take these folks into custody as safely as possible. I would like to again reiterate what we know about the suspects. Again, Mr. Mead, I believe we have provided photographs and updated photographs of him of particular note. He has tattoos on his face, the number 1 on one side of his face and the number 11 on the other side. He is a documented gang member and with the Aryan Knights, and obviously 1 is the first letter of the alphabet, 11 is K is the 11th letter of the alphabet, so the 1 and 11 refer to AK, or Aryan Knights. and we believe that this was a coordinated attack, ambush on the Department of Corrections officers, and certainly a planned endeavor to free him from custody. I will be happy to answer questions that you may have in just a few minutes, but I'd like to turn the time over to Mr. Tewalt from Department of Corrections to also address the incident involving their officers. We are certainly grateful that there has been no loss of life to this point. We understand it is a very difficult thing for these officers to go through. They have been wounded and injured, and that is a tough thing to endure, especially for them and their families and close friends and loved ones. So our hearts go out to them. We hope and pray for their speedy recovery, and I'll again answer questions in a few minutes for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. My name is Josh Tewalt. I'm the director for the Idaho Department of Correction. I think the Chief did a great job of outlining the timeline of events as we know them from when this incident took place. I'm not going to speak in any detail about how those particular events unfolded, as those are still being investigated. But our priority, first and foremost, is making sure our staff are okay. And we're incredibly grateful that our staff are healing right now. We're also grateful for the tremendous response from law enforcement, Boise Police Department, Ada County Sheriff's Office, Idaho State Police, Garden City, and others from around the valley who have reached out, offered assistance, both in support for our agency, but also help in apprehending Skylar Meade and his accomplices once they're identified. Skylar Meade was housed in administrative segregation in B Block at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. I know we've had a number of questions about what led to his transport to the hospital. Last night, he engaged in what I would describe as self-injurious behavior. Our on-site medical determined that he needed to be transported off-site for emergent care. At that point, we stood up a transport team that left the Idaho Maximum Security Institution at 9:35 and arrived at St. Alphonsus Hospital at 9:50. Meade was treated until he was discharged at 2:08 this morning, and as we now know, 2:15, that 911 call was made for assistance. As a result, and the Chief adequately and appropriately described this as what we believe to be a planned attack, but in the event that it was not isolated, we took every precaution we possibly could. At 2:33 this morning, the entire South Boise complex was placed on secure status. Our correctional emergency response team was activated. We deployed resources from throughout the state and the agency to help assist wherever those resources may be needed at the department or in the community. And we're especially appreciative of all the help that we have received since. In the meantime, we've also made every investigative resource at our disposal available to try to help understand how this attack was planned, but also to glean any information or intelligence that we can to help identify the accomplices or others who may have been involved in securing Mr. Meade's escape. With that, we're also happy to answer any questions that you all may have, but again, just really want to express our gratitude that no lives were lost this morning. That's, I think from my seat, there's not a scarier phone call to get. So just incredibly relieved that at least the physical wounds are well on their way to healing, although we've got a lot of work left to do. And as I said, I think the response this morning and everything that we've seen since just shows how well this state is served by the law enforcement professionals that call Idaho home. So with that, I'll stand aside and answer any questions that you may have for us.
Do you have any other information on the suspect who shot at officers?
So we are working to identify that person. We do not have that done yet. So for all we can say right now is we're focusing on the vehicle. It appears to be a 2020 gray Honda Civic, and that vehicle was seen fleeing from the scene. We do not know where that vehicle is right now, so we would ask for the public to keep an eye out, be alert, and look for that vehicle or anything else that may look suspicious. Obviously, Mr. Meade is fairly recognizable from the photographs that have been provided, so we ask you to please watch and look for them, him, the vehicle, anything that you may come across or see or know. One thing that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, this incident was obviously very traumatic for those who were at St. Alphonsus Hospital, both their staff, people who were being treated for medical issues at that time, and so we want to recognize the fact that it was a traumatic incident for those folks, and we would also like to recognize that St. Alphonsus was not necessarily targeted in this situation. It just happened to be where Mr. Meade was being treated. So business has resumed and is bumping right along at St. Alphonsus. They are continuing to serve the needs of our community. We do not believe there is any danger there at this point for anyone who may need to respond for treatment or for appointments or anything else on that campus. It does appear to be safe and secure, and they are conducting business as usual. We are turning all of our focus at this point to the apprehension of Meade and identification of his accomplice or accomplices who may be involved in the planning and execution of this event that brought us here today.
Chief, you said Boise Police didn't get there until after the suspects left.
The investigation does appear to show that they fled just prior to officers arriving on scene. So the initial shooting targeting the Idaho Department of Corrections officers, both of those officers were shot before Boise Police arrived on the scene, and we believe that both the shooter and Mr. Meade fled in that vehicle before they arrived. Correct.
And that third officer, you said they sustained injuries after being fired at. Could you say if they were shot?
Certainly in the investigation will bear out those details. We know that, frankly, at the very least, there was some shrapnel type injuries from something, so I cannot definitively say if it was a bullet wound or if there was simply some shrapnel that injured him, but that will certainly be covered and become clearer in the coming days to us for sure.
And are those IDOC employees in uniform or are they not?
I would have to let Mr. Tewald answer that question.
Yeah, as a matter of practice, I'm going to get rid of that. Our transport staff are in uniformed, what we call black and tans, with a ballistic vest. But they are in uniform. But I also think it's worth noting, at least from my discussions with the staff who were involved, just how chaotic a scene like that can be. And while the investigation is certainly going to help us better understand what happened, I can tell you from all of our staff who were involved this morning, we were appreciative of BPD showing up when they did.
Another follow-up question to that. I know 3 of your employees were injured. Could you comment on the typical staff to inmate ratio you guys do perform one of those medical transports?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a great question. I think first, for context, there's a certain level of care that simply can't be provided in a correctional setting. We don't always have the resources, particularly when there's an emergency or it requires a level of service that isn't available on site at the facility. So we have transport procedures that are basically dictated by the custody level or the threat risk of the person being transported. As I noted before, Skylar Meade was in administrative segregation. There's not a higher custody level that we manage at the Department of Correction, and that's not a classification that is determined by your criminal history. It's a classification that's earned by your behavior while in custody. So we take a number of precautions, and in this case, we had 2 staff that rode with him in the ambulance, as well as providing a chase vehicle with armed staff. And in a typical higher risk situation like this, you have each unarmed staff member helps escort on one side of the individual, while you have an armed staff member that trails behind to keep watch.
Can you say again that type of custody was in?
Administrative segregation.
And what exactly is that?
It's a form of restrictive housing that really is reserved for those people in our custody who have proven they can't be housed without being a danger to themselves, staff, or other people in our custody.
Mr. Wall, considering what you just talked about, and then also going back to a phrase you used earlier as a planned attack, do we have any idea how this was coordinated, and also considering his gang affiliations, is that something that you guys are suspecting or looking into?
Absolutely. As I said before, we have every investigative resource at our disposal is pointed towards trying to help us figure out, number one, how this happened, but number two, whether we can glean any information that'll help with the apprehension of anybody who was involved. So I feel premature to speculate on any of the results, but again, in noting the cooperation that we've had from other law enforcement, and particularly with BPD's leadership on the investigation to apprehend those responsible, there are a lot. All of us are throwing our resources to try to get to the bottom of this as quickly as possible.
Is there any precedent for this kind of escape attempt or planned attack, like you said?
It's tough to talk about precedent. I think I would call it unprecedented and unthinkable, but I think we're certainly, as part of routine policy and practice, we'll have a number of after action reports, and we'll do everything we can to try to learn from this event. But for today, our hearts are with our staff and everybody who was involved, and our attention is put towards apprehending those who were responsible.
Could you elaborate further on Meade's self-inflicted injuries and the severity of them?
In all candor, I don't know how much I can elaborate. It appeared, as I described, that it was self-injurious behavior. He was evaluated by our on-site medical, and they made the determination that he needed to be transported off-site for emergent care. I don't know how much more I can go into detail on that, but I think that's a pretty satisfactory explanation of what caused that transport to take place.
Do you typically go to the same hospital, or do you have different hospitals that you
I can get back on that. I think it depends on the availability of the emergency rooms and the type of issue that's being treated. So I'll have to get back and provide some additional clarification on whether there's a routine that can be ascertained. But I just, with practical experience and knowledge, I would say that tends to be varied a little bit based on who's busy, what's available, and the type of care that they need to receive.
Is it possible that there was other people at other hospitals prepared to do the same plan?
I don't want to speculate on what's possible. What we know is there was somebody at St. Al's.
Maybe that's a better question for the law enforcement. Do you guys think that there could have been other people at other hospitals staging?
So I would echo what's been stated. We don't know what's possible. We do know that just about anything's possible, and it's certainly going to be part of the investigation to follow up and see. Certainly we want to know exactly what happened, and our efforts will, I am confident, lead us to the apprehension of those involved, to the identification of those involved, and we should have a better idea once that takes place. But we are keeping everything open as far as possibilities, and we'll be looking at all of those things in the investigative process.
What was the last lead you all
There have been dozens of leads coming in all night and all day, so I don't know exactly what the last one is, but I know that there are teams of detectives following up on leads throughout the night and throughout the day today, and throughout, frankly, the entire state and region. So we have partners that are helping with this investigation from multiple agencies. Again, some right here. We appreciate the Idaho State Police and their support. As has been mentioned, the Ada County Sheriff's Office, Meridian Police Department, Garden City Police Department, Caldwell, Nampa, everybody is on board, including agencies to the north, to the east, and all around us in the state of Idaho and beyond for this investigation.
I don't know if you know, but how far do you
Well, if they're obeying the speed limit, I guess you could do that math, but certainly the possibilities are they could be anywhere at this point. We don't have leads necessarily narrowing them down to a particular area. We are open to wherever they might be at this point. We're following every lead and accepting every possibility.
That blue alert came out a couple of hours after the shooting. Is there any reason for that delay?
Certainly the information that we were gathering, responding to a very chaotic scene and gathering what we could. It takes some time to gather footage from security cameras and all of those places to put it together, contact the Idaho State Police, have them push that out. All of that information needs to be vetted somewhat to make sure that it's accurate so that we are not unnecessarily alarming members of the public. And we also take into consideration that at 2 or 3 a.m. there's probably not a whole lot of people sitting by their phones waiting for that information. It's probably more effective when you get a little bit closer to the waking hours for most of the folks in the general public. One thing that I would like to say, we don't speculate too much at this point in these investigations, but I think it's fairly obvious from what I have seen that the officers who responded to this incident responded with the understanding in mind that there was an active shooter at the hospital, and they went into immediately upon their arrival to try and deal with that threat to protect the staff and the folks that were working and the patrons at St. Alphonsus. And so they immediately entered, and as Mr. T-Walt alluded to, it was a very chaotic scene. So the investigation will bear out the details, but I personally am thankful for officers who are willing to run towards the sound of gunfire and be willing to face any challenge and any threat regardless of the risk to their personal safety. We are again grateful that those who were injured are not more seriously injured, and that it looks like they will pull through and make a recovery. So with that, I think we're going to end our time today. Unless anybody has a really pressing last question, we're going to thank you for your attendance, and we'll give you more information as it becomes available. Thank you.